Yes, it's John G. Sutton, Tales from the Jails. I'm going to speak today about a question that I've been asked by the individual who lists his name as M24. He joined us for the Q&As the other night and wanted to ask a question and forgot to ask during the time that we were on air. Still on an hour. I'll do another one in November. The first Tuesday in November. I will do that. So you can join in then if you've got any questions. Think of them between now and then. Or ask me in the comments below. I always try and answer, you know. Anyway, this guy asked me, M24, I assume it's a man. I believe so. Was there ever an inmate that I encountered that made me think, you know, that I should not really be in the job as a prison officer? Well, there was indeed one such inmate that made me question my position in the prison service, and that inmate was a man called George Wilkinson, who was extremely big. He was about the size of, I would say, Tyson Fury, round about that. Around about 6'7", extremely huge man, probably about 22 stone, maybe round about that. And I encountered him on D-Wing, D1 at the Scrubs in 1979, round about November 1979, when George Wilkinson went on hunger strike. He refused to eat and he refused to drink, and he was seen by the medical staff and seen by the psychiatrists and advised that if he continued to behave like this, then he would seriously injure himself, and he couldn't take it, you see. Believe this or not, George Wilkinson was the village bully. He was from a place, a town in the Cumbria, in the Lake District, and he had been terrorising the area. You know, he was completely without limits. Everybody was frightened stiff of him. He'd assaulted numerous people, battered police officers, and generally speaking, they couldn't handle him. Seriously, they couldn't. And he came into strange ways and thought he could do the same trick again. Anyway, he ended up being introduced to your friend and mine, Bootsy, the Chinese money box. He met him, yeah. Piggy and the black dog, all the staff down D1. And, you know, for some unknown reason, George Wilkinson didn't bully them, but he tried. And I saw him in his cell on D1 and I thought, do I really want to be a part of this? Is this really what my life should be about? George Wilkinson was standing stark bollock naked in a bowl of water, yeah? Drinking, he was drinking at the time, drinking water, but not just drinking a little bit of water, drinking copious amounts of water. I said to him, you know, you were going to hurt yourself, you'll damage your kidneys doing that. But he just laughed at you, you know, like a bloody great big gorilla, you know. I said, you're going to hurt yourself, you know, but I thought, do I really want to be a part of this? That's doing this to this man. And at the same time, they had an inmate on D1 who believed that he was schizophrenic. He believed he was psychologically disturbed. And the staff on D1 they captured some mice, and they got paints from the art school in the prison and painted the mice different colours. Yellow mice, green mice, blue mice, and they put them in this inmate's cell. So he was actually seeing coloured mice running round his cell. I think they painted one with polka dots, stuff like that. Anyway, when the psychiatrist came to see him, he told him, there's blue mice in my cell, pink mice, yellow mice, one with polka dots on, one with a white head, and all this. And the psychiatrist obviously put 2 and 2 together and came up with 5, yeah. Because this inmate wasn't mad. He was actually seeing coloured mice. But it wasn't in his head, he wasn't mad, he was actually seeing coloured mice. And the staff seemed to think this was absolutely hilarious. The guy ended up in Broadmoor on an indefinite sentence. I mean, we can laugh about it, but I actually thought at the time, I don't really think that I should be allowing myself to be involved in this. It was round about the same time that I was attempting to get a trade union together for non-supervisory grade prison officers, because I believe that we should not allow ourselves to be managed by both the management and the trade union, because if that was the case, there would be no representation. You didn't have anybody to complain to. The people that you were wanting to complain about were the people who were representing you. So that would not work. It worked for the government, and that is why the Prison Officers Association defeated my efforts, because the government were backing them all the way. Seriously. What kind of a trade union has no regional offices, doesn't pay its own telephone bills, has no facilities to meet outside of the prison, outside of the employer's quarters? The POA hasn't. The only way the POA meets inside the prison, or inside the prison club, again a Home Office establishment. Yeah, I questioned whether or not I should be in the prison service at that time. But the answer to your question, M24, is the one inmate that made me did think that I shouldn't be there was George Wilkinson. He was transferred from Strangeways on the 4th of December 1979, and on the morning of the 5th of December he was found dead in his cell at Walton Jail, Liverpool. Seriously. You can see why I didn't want to get involved in any crap like that. Anyway, thank you for those who have been making favourable comments about my attempts to be a poet. I've been a poet since I was a child, actually. I used to read poems in the mills when I worked in the factories. They used to call me Shakespeare when I was about 16. I used to write poems and read them in the factory canteens. Anyway, this is a poem I wrote about my brother, actually, because for a period of time my brother was a sergeant in the mounted police in Manchester. I think he did about 3 years in the mounted police before he transferred as a detective inspector to the CID again, because he spent most of his time in the CID. But this is a poem I wrote about him when he was riding a horse in the mounted police. Do you know what he told me? God's honest truth is, he had a big stick, and he said when it was the Manchester United game, because they used to patrol on the horses, he said if anybody got in his way in the things or tried to approach his horse, he had a big stick and he'd belt them with this big stick. Poof. It's all right. I know you'd say if he hit me with a stick I'd drag him off his horse. My brother was 6'4" and built like Goliath, I don't think you'd pull him off his horse twice. Anyway, this is a poem I wrote about him, and you can look him up, actually. I'm sure he's there. He was in all the papers at the time. They called him Super Cop when he was working with the Serious Crime Squad. He was on the front page of some of the newspapers, Manchester Evening News and all that. He locked them all up, because he used to lock them up, my brother, not piss around like they do today. But this is a poem I wrote about him called Dusty's Last Ride. It's pure fiction, by the way. None of this ever happened. Yeah. Dusty's Last Ride by John G. Sutton. He was Manchester mounted. They called him Dusty Crutch. His horse was off a milk float. It wasn't up to much. Ernie used to own it. Trigger was its name. They rode the streets of Salford. Crime busting was their game. Manchester was swinging. The lads were getting pissed. Wop, Bopaloola boomed from the Ritz. United lost to Bolton. City bit the dust. Trouble in the sunset for the man that we all trust. They were running down Oxford Street, bellies full of beer. The ladies dived for cover as the hooligans cheered. Dusty on trigger, reached for his club. The adrenaline jumped in his true blue bud. Swept back the peak of his 10-gallon hat. Then he galloped at the yobbos and gave 'em lots of that. They say he died a glory and made the mob pay, but the Manchester mounted met his end that day. Now when the moon is shining late on Saturday nights and the gangs are gathering for a battle or a fight, some say they've seen a phantom riding on his steer with a 10-gallon hat and a 6-inch sneer. The hooligans who see him kick trouble into touch, 'cause they're all scared shitless by the ghost of Dusty Crutch. There you go. Dusty's Last Ride, about my brother, Martin Sutton. Happy days, eh? So if you've got any questions, send them to me here. I'll try and answer, usually answer in the comments, you know. And don't forget, on the 7th of November, my book is published. It's called HMP Manchester Prison Officer. It's published by Sean Atwood's publishing company, Gadfly. It will be available on his on Amazon. And I'll also be, my interview with Sean will be broadcast that day. And following the broadcast, there'll be a Q&A session, so you can phone in. So let's keep that in the diary. 7th of November this year. This is John G. Sutton. Tales from the Jails.